Can I get a window seat, please? Just one window seat, and I'm gone, asterisk. I never thought a Tuesday morning at Incheon International Airport would be the moment my lungs forgot how to work. I'd been planning this for 6 weeks. 6 weeks of hiding cash in the lining of my suitcase. 6 weeks of deleting browser history, booking flights from a library computer, telling no one, where I was going or when. All I needed was 40 more minutes. 40 minutes to hand over my passport, collect my boarding pass, and disappear into a country Brad Hunter had no access to. I was wearing my beige trench coat, the one he always said made me look like I was playing pretend at being sophisticated. My small gold necklace sat cool against my collarbone. My carry-on was packed lightly. 1 bag. No trace. The gold-class terminal smelled like fresh coffee and expensive cologne. Marble floors so polished I could see my own reflection looking back at me, composed, careful, almost free. The airline agent smiled and reached for my passport. That's when I heard him. Naomi. Asterisk. Not a question. Not a greeting. A command. My hand tightened around my passport before I even turned around. My body knew that voice the way it knew the sound of a door slamming at 2 a.m., involuntary. Visceral. Already bracing. Brad was walking toward me through the terminal in a dark suit that looked expensive from a distance and sloppy up close. Tie crooked. Face flushed. That look in his eyes, the one I'd learned to read like weather. The one that always came right before the storm. You think you're just going to leave? You think you're better than me now? Asterisk. His voice filled the terminal. Heads turned. The airline agent's smile disappeared. I kept my voice low. Brad. Don't do this here. Asterisk. Don't do. Asterisk, he laughed, sharp and ugly. Asterisk, you packed your whole life into a carry-on and didn't say a word to me. And I'm the one doing something? Asterisk. He grabbed my wrist. I pulled back. And then his hand came across my face. The sound cracked through the terminal like something breaking that could not be repaired. Sharp. Flat. Echoing off marble and glass and the stunned silence of 50 people who all suddenly found something fascinating to look at on their phones. My passport hit the floor. My hand flew to my cheek. The pain was secondary. It always was. The first thing that came was the shame, hot, immediate, and completely unearned. That was the part he'd trained into me. That was the part one hated most. The airline agent took one step back. The security guard near the pillar looked away. Nobody moved, asterisk. Nobody ever moves. But then something changed. The noise of the terminal didn't rise. It fell. Like someone had turned a dial. The ambient sound of rolling luggage, boarding announcements, a child somewhere asking for a snack, all of it dimmed. Not gone. Just pushed back. The way sound behaves when something larger enters the room. I blinked through the sting in my eyes. And I saw them. A line of men in perfectly pressed black suits, standing in a clean formation I hadn't noticed forming. Earpieces. Hands folded. Eyes forward. They weren't rushing. They weren't shouting. They were simply there. A wall that had materialized from the architecture of the terminal itself. People stepped back. Not away from Brad. Away from them. And then one man separated from the line. He wasn't tall in the way that demands attention. He was tall in the way that makes a room recalibrate. Dark overcoat draped across his shoulders without his arms in the sleeves. Black suit beneath it, perfectly tailored. Hair slicked back. One heavy ring on his right hand that he was, slowly, deliberately, sliding off and placing into his breast pocket as he walked. He didn't look at me. He looked at my passport on the floor. He bent down, unhurried, like a man with no reason to rush because time itself adjusted around him, and picked it up. studied the cover for a moment. Then he looked at Brad. His voice, when it came, was quiet. Not soft. Not gentle. Quiet, asterisk. The kind of quiet that makes everyone around you hold their breath just to hear it. You're making a lot of noise, asterisk, he said, asterisk, in my terminal. Asterisk. Brad blinked. Asterisk, excuse me? Who the, asterisk? The man took one step closer. Brad stopped talking. And I watched something I had never seen in 3 years, not once, not ever. I watched Brad Hunter's face go pale. If you're reading this right now, wherever you are in the world, subscribe and drop your location in the comments, because I need you to see how fast everything is about to change. Comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going. Because what that man whispered next didn't just stop Brad. It ended him. 6 weeks before I stood in that terminal with a handprint burning on my face, I was sitting on the bathroom floor of our apartment at 1 a.m., typing one-way flights into my phone with the shower running so Brad wouldn't hear the keyboard clicks. That was what my life had become. Shower running. Voice low. Movements calculated. Every decision filtered first through the question, how will he react to this? I hadn't always been this way. I want to be clear about that. I came to South Korea with a graduate fellowship, a research position at Yonsei University, and enough confidence to move to a country where I didn't speak the language and figure it out anyway. I spoke at conferences. I negotiated my own housing. I navigated subway systems and bureaucratic offices and cultural differences that would have sent other people home in the first month. I was not a woman who hid in bathrooms. But Brad had a way of making the extraordinary feel ordinary. Not all at once. That's never how it works. It started with opinions that sounded like concern. Asterisk, that dress is a little much, don't you think? I just don't want people getting the wrong idea about you, asterisk. Then it became corrections that sounded like help. Then silence felt like punishment. Then apologies that came with flowers and the unspoken agreement that we would never discuss what the apology was actually for. By the time I understood what was happening to me, I had already reorganized my entire life around avoiding his moods. I'd stopped seeing certain friends because their names made his jaw tighten. I'd stopped mentioning my research because his eyes went flat when I talked about accomplishments he didn't share. I'd learned to read the way he set his keys down on the counter when he came home. Gentle meant manageable, loud meant I should already be making dinner and not asking any questions. The one-way ticket was my first real decision in 2 years. I booked it on a Wednesday. I told no one. I put the confirmation number in a note app, one password protected and labeled grocery lists. I started moving small amounts of cash into a separate account. Nothing that would show up as a pattern, nothing large enough to flag. I packed my suitcase in stages over 3 weeks, adding 1 or 2 items at a time and sliding it back under the guest bed where he never looked. The night before my flight, he came home in a good mood. That was almost harder. He brought takeout from the Korean barbecue place I loved before I learned to stop mentioning what I loved. He poured drinks. He laughed at something on television and looked over at me with that easy smile, the one that still worked on me sometimes, the one that reminded me who he'd been in the first 3 months before I knew better. You've been quiet lately, asterisk, he said. Just tired, asterisk, I said. Asterisk, work stuff. Asterisk. He nodded and went back to the television. I sat beside him and ate and smiled at the right moments and thought about my suitcase under the guest bed and my passport in my coat pocket and my 6 a.m. car booking on my phone. That was last night. I woke up at 4. I dressed in the dark. I carried my suitcase to the elevator with my shoes in my hand so the heels wouldn't click on the hardwood. I didn't leave a note. There was nothing I could write that would have been honest and also safe. The car came. I got in. I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Incheon International Airport at 5:45 in the morning has a specific kind of quiet that feels like permission. The terminal lights are bright but not aggressive. The crowds are thin. The energy is purposeful, people moving towards something, not away. The gold-class terminal was even more hushed. Cream marble floors. Low ambient music that costs someone a lot of money to feel like it costs nothing. Private check-in counters staffed by agents in immaculate uniforms who smiled like they'd been trained to make you feel that leaving was entirely your choice and entirely your right. I got in line. I set my carry-on at my feet. I took my passport out of my coat pocket and held it in both hands like something I was afraid to put down. 40 minutes. That was all. The agent at the counter beckoned me forward with a smile. I stepped up. Slid my passport across the marble surface. She opened it, glanced at my face, began typing. Traveling alone today? Asterisk. Yes, asterisk, I said. Asterisk, just me. Asterisk. She smiled again. Started printing. And then the air in the terminal changed. I didn't see him before I heard him. I heard him the way you hear a car alarm, not because it's subtle but because some part of your nervous system has been trained to recognize that specific frequency as danger. Naomi. Asterisk. My hand gripped the edge of the counter. I turned slowly, the way you turn when you already know what you're about to face and you're giving yourself one last second before you have to face it. Brad was coming through the terminal entrance in long, aggressive strides. His suit was the charcoal one he wore when he wanted to look serious. His tie was already crooked. His face was flushed in the way it got when he'd worked himself into something on the drive over, when he'd rehearsed an argument in the car and arrived already inside it. He must have checked my location. I had turned off sharing 6 weeks ago, but he must have, I don't know. Found another way. He always found another way. You were just going to leave, asterisk, he said, loudly enough that the couple behind me in line shifted their weight. Asterisk, you were going to get on a plane and not say a single word to me. Asterisk. Brad. Asterisk, I kept my voice low. Asterisk, please don't do this here. Asterisk. Don't do, asterisk, the laugh was sharp and humorless. Asterisk, you packed your whole life and disappeared in the middle of the night and I'm the problem for showing up? Asterisk. The agent behind the counter had gone very still. Her hand hovered near the keyboard but wasn't touching it. I'm not doing this here, asterisk, I said. You don't get to decide what we're doing. Asterisk. He grabbed my wrist. His grip was immediate and hard, the kind that bypasses any chance to pull away because it's designed to prevent exactly that. I turned toward him instinctively, which is what he wanted, because it brought me close enough that no one watching could see exactly what was happening between us. Let go, asterisk, I said. You're not going anywhere. Asterisk, his voice had dropped but not softened. It had the low, controlled register he used when he was the most dangerous. Not when he was screaming but when he'd gone quiet in the way that meant he'd already decided something. Asterisk, you think you're too good for me? After everything I've done for you in this country? Asterisk. Let go of my wrist. Asterisk. Say it louder, asterisk, he said. Asterisk, go ahead. Make a scene. See who helps you. Asterisk. He was right that no one was helping. I could see it in my peripheral vision without turning to look, the careful repositioning of eyes, the sudden interest in boarding passes and phone screens, the agent behind the counter who had taken one quiet step back. This is the part no one talks about. Not the violence itself but the moment right before it, when you can see it coming and you understand with complete clarity that the space between you and it is closing and there is nowhere to go and you are going to have to simply absorb it and survive it and figure out what comes next from the other side. His hand came across my face. The sound was flat and sharp and it echoed. My passport hit the floor. My hand went to my cheek. The pain arrived in a wave. First heat, then sting, then the deep throb that settles into bone. The terminal didn't erupt. It went silent. Not the silence of outrage. Not the silence of people preparing to intervene. The silence of a collective flinch, of 50 people suddenly very interested in being somewhere else with their eyes. I stood at the counter with my hand pressed to my face and my boarding pass half printed on the counter and my passport on the floor, and I thought, with a clarity that surprised me, I am still standing. I heard them before I saw them. Not exactly. More like the absence of something, the background noise of the terminal pulling back, thinning, the way it does when a frequency shifts outside the range you can consciously register but your body catches it anyway. I lowered my hand from my cheek. There was a line of men in black suits standing in a clean formation that I had not noticed forming. They were simply there. 6 of them, maybe 8, placed at intervals that created a perimeter without looking like one. Earpieces visible but not prominent. Hands folded at the front. Postures neutral. Faces directed forward with expressions that communicated nothing except that they had seen everything and were entirely unbothered by it. People stepped back without being asked to. The couple behind me in line had moved 3 feet without appearing to make the decision consciously. The agent behind the counter had retreated to the wall. 2 travelers near the adjacent counter were suddenly very focused on their luggage tags. The security guard who had been stationed at the pillar 10 feet away was gone. Not hiding. Just redirected. Elsewhere. As if recalled. Brad turned to look at them. His chin came up in the automatic way it did when he was calibrating a new situation, deciding whether to be louder or louder still. What is this? Asterisk. No one answered him. And then one man walked forward from the line. He separated from the formation without announcement, without urgency, moving at the exact pace of someone who has never once needed to hurry because the room always waits for him. Dark overcoat across his shoulders without his arms through the sleeves, draped, like a detail someone had considered. Black suit beneath. Hair slicked back from a face that held no readable emotion except a kind of patient attention, the way a chess player looks at a board mid-game. His right hand moved to his breast pocket. He removed a heavy ring, I saw it catch the terminal light briefly, and placed it into the pocket with the careful deliberateness of someone setting something down rather than putting it away. Like the ring was a formality he was choosing to step out of. He didn't look at Brad. He looked at my passport on the floor. He bent at the knee, unhurried, completely composed, and picked it up. Hold it for a moment. Looked at the cover. Then he looked up, and for the first time, looked at me. His eyes were calm. Not cold, I want to be specific about that, because cold suggests the absence of something. His were calm the way deep water is calm, which is not the same as empty. There was something behind them that was simply not in a rush to show itself. He extended my passport toward me. I took it. My hand was still trembling. I'm not sure he noticed, or if he noticed and simply filed it away. Then he looked at Brad. You're making a lot of noise, asterisk, he said, asterisk, in my terminal. Asterisk. His voice was so quiet that the words arrived like they'd traveled a long distance to get here. Not loud enough to perform to the room. Loud enough, exactly, for the room to fall silent to receive them. Brad's chin came up. Asterisk, excuse me? Who the, asterisk? The man took 1 step forward. 1 step. Brad stopped. I watched it happen. Watched the words leave his mouth and then not arrive anywhere because something in Brad had registered, below the level of thought, that the arithmetic of this situation had shifted in a way he hadn't accounted for. He moved closer to Brad the way the weather moves toward the coast. Inevitable. Unhurried. Already decided. He reached out, and I held my breath, and adjusted Brad's tie. Not aggressively. With 2 fingers, he straightened the crooked knot. Smoothed the collar of Brad's jacket on one side where it had turned up. The gesture was so precise and so intimate that Brad didn't react to it, couldn't react to it, because there was no category in his understanding of threat that accounted for a man fixing your tie before destroying you. Then he leaned in. His mouth came close to Brad's ear. I couldn't hear the words. I don't think anyone in that terminal could hear the words. I saw Brad's posture change, saw the aggressive forward lean he'd arrived with begin to compress, like a building losing structural support floor by floor. His shoulders dropped first. Then his jaw went slack. Then his eyes, those eyes I had spent years learning to read for danger, went somewhere I had never seen them go before. Afraid. Brad Hunter, who had spent 3 years making me smaller so he could feel larger, who had chased me to an international airport at dawn because the idea of me existing outside of his reach was intolerable to him, was standing in a luxury terminal in Seoul with a stranger's mouth at his ear, and his face had gone the color of something left in the cold. The man straightened. He did not look at Brad again. He turned, and for the first time I saw the edge of the tattoo. Dark ink curling from beneath his shirt cuff and along the inside of his wrist, the head of something that might have been a dragon rendered in detail that suggested the rest of it extended much further up his arm and told a story about the kind of world he operated in and the rank he held inside it. He looked at me. Then at my boarding pass, still half extended over the counter. Then at the agent, who had returned to her station without appearing to make the decision to do so. The agent looked down at her screen. Resumed typing. Printed the boarding pass. Slid it across the counter with the focused efficiency of someone who understood that the fastest path to normal was to simply proceed as if it already was. I picked it up. My cheek was still burning. Brad hadn't moved. I found a seat in the gold class lounge 20 minutes later. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Planes moving on the tarmac beyond the glass in the gray pink of early morning. A cup of green tea someone had placed in front of me that I didn't remember requesting. My hands had mostly stopped shaking. I kept looking at my boarding pass. Gate 47. Boarding in 90 minutes. The numbers felt impossible in the way that real things feel impossible when you have spent a long time surviving something that felt permanent. One of the men in black suits stood near the lounge entrance. Not watching me directly. Watching the space. I thought about Brad's face. The compression of it. The way the blood had left. I thought about the voice, that quiet, specific voice. And the words I hadn't been able to hear, and I understood that whatever had been said was not the kind of thing you said loudly. The things said loudly were for performance. What had been said in Brad's ear was operational. It was information. It was a set of terms delivered to someone who suddenly understood they had no negotiating position. A shadow fell across the seat beside me. I didn't have to look up to know. He sat down without asking. Not close, there was appropriate distance. He rested one arm along the back of the seat, easy and unbothered, and looked out at the tarmac the way someone looks at a view they've seen many times and still find preferable to most alternatives. The ring was back on his hand. I looked at it, heavy, dark metal, some kind of seal or insignia on the face that I couldn't make out clearly. You didn't have to do that, I said. He didn't answer immediately. Let the words sit for a moment. No, he agreed. I didn't. Then why? He turned his head and looked at me with that same patient attention, unhurried, reading something in my face that I wasn't sure I was offering. Because he was loud, he said simply, in a place that belongs to me. And because, a brief pause, so brief I might have imagined it he had already been loud before today. Something cold moved through me that had nothing to do with fear. Or not only fear. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He looked back at the tarmac. I looked at the side of his face, the clean line of his jaw, the unhurried stillness of him, and I thought about the way the terminal had rearranged itself around his presence. The way security had withdrawn. The way people had stepped back without instruction. The way Brad, who was afraid of nothing because he had never met anything that required him to be, had stood at this man's ear and received something that broke him open. Who are you? I asked. He considered the question the way you consider a question you've been asked many times and have several answers to, and are deciding which one is appropriate for this particular moment. He turned and looked at me again. Something in his expression shifted almost imperceptibly, not warmth exactly. More like acknowledgement. Like a door opening an inch. Someone who made sure your flight isn't delayed, asterisk, he said. He stood. Adjusted his overcoat across his shoulders. And then, with the same unhurried efficiency with which he had done everything else, he walked back toward the lounge entrance. The man by the door stepped aside. I sat with my green tea going cold in my hands and my boarding pass on the seat beside me and the burning in my cheek already beginning to fade, and I understood, with the particular clarity of someone who has just walked out of one dangerous situation and may have walked directly into the gravity of another, that what had just happened in this terminal was not random. None of it was random. And the man who had just walked away from me knew a great deal more about this morning than I had told him. Subscribe to see how this unfolds, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story is going, asterisk. The name came to me in pieces, the way dangerous information always does. Never all at once, always through the gaps between what people say and what they choose not to. The first piece came from a woman named Ji-hyun, a junior researcher I'd been friendly with at Yonsei before Brad made me stop attending the department's social events. She messaged me 2 days after the airport, responding to something I'd posted about finally leaving. Her message started warm and then went careful in the way messages go, careful when someone wants to tell you something they're not sure you're ready to hear. You were at Incheon Gold Class Terminal, you said? Early Tuesday, asterisk. Yes, asterisk, I typed back. A long pause. Then, asterisk, Naomi. The Gold Class Terminal is managed through a private hospitality contract. That contract is held by a company called DH Holdings. I don't know how to explain this to you in a small message. Just, Google it. And be careful. Asterisk. I Googled it from my hotel room that evening, 2 days before my rebooked flight. I was still in Seoul. My original flight had been delayed, not cancelled, delayed, rebooked, smoothly, with an upgrade to a different fare class that I had not requested and had not been charged for, and when I called to ask the airline why, the representative paused for a moment too long before saying it had been a courtesy adjustment and wishing me a pleasant stay. DH Holdings had 11 search results on the first page and none of them were news articles in the way that company news is usually news. They were financial disclosures. Industry directories. A brief mention in a Korean business quarterly from 4 years ago describing a conglomerate restructuring that had resulted in DH Holdings absorbing 3 mid-sized logistics companies and a private security firm. The profile was clean in the specific way that things are clean when someone has put effort into keeping them that way. The chairman's name, listed in a corporate filing at the bottom of the third search result, was Kang Dae-hyun. I sat with that for a while. Then I searched for the name alone. The results were sparser than they should have been for someone who controlled that much. A photograph from a charity gala 3 years ago. Him in a dark suit at the edge of a frame, not centered, as if he'd allowed himself to be photographed but not made available for it. A mention in a real estate transaction filing involving a commercial property in Gangnam. And then, on a forum that looked like it had last been actively moderated sometime in 2019, a thread in Korean that I ran through a translation app with shaking hands. The translation was imperfect but the meaning was not. Kangpai. Old family. The kind that doesn't make noise because they don't need to. DH Holdings is the front that faces the light. Everything else faces the other direction. Don't ask questions about the terminal contract. Don't ask questions about the Incheon arrangement. Some floors belong to people you don't want to asterisk. I put my phone face down on the hotel bed. I thought about the ring sliding off his finger before he walked toward Brad. The tattoo at his wrist. The way security had withdrawn as if receiving an instruction from someone above their chain of command. The way the terminal had reorganized itself not in response to violence but in response to presence. I thought about what Ji-hyun had said. Some floors belong to people you don't want to And then I thought about what he'd said to me in the lounge. He had already been loud before today, asterisk. Brad's first move came 4 days later. I know now that it was Brad's move. At the time it arrived looking like bureaucracy, an email from the university's international office informing me that a formal complaint had been filed regarding my research data protocols and that my visiting scholar credentials were under administrative review pending investigation. The email was courteous and procedural, and it was designed to do one specific thing: keep me in South Korea long enough for Brad to re-establish leverage. I recognized his fingerprints on it immediately. This was how he operated when direct confrontation failed. He didn't come back louder. He came back through systems. Through HR complaints and administrative flags and the kind of institutional friction that grinds people down slowly and costs them money and time and the energy they need to keep fighting. I forwarded the email to my lawyer in the States and sat in my hotel room and felt the familiar weight of him settling back over the situation like a weather system I'd thought I'd outrun. Then my phone rang. The number was listed as a sole office line for a company I didn't recognize. I answered because I was still in the phase of answering things I should probably have let go to voicemail. The voice on the other end was calm and professional and Korean accented in English, and it said, *Ms. Williams. I'm calling on behalf of DH Holdings. Mr. Kang would like you to know that the administrative review filed against your credentials at Yonsei University has been identified as procedurally irregular. The filing has been referred to the university's ethics office for review. You should receive a formal withdrawal of the complaint within 48 hours. Is there anything else we can help you with today? I sat there for a moment. How did you? I started. Have a pleasant evening, Ms. Williams. The line ended. The complaint was withdrawn in 36 hours. The email from the university's international office was apologetic and attributed the filing to a third-party administrative error. Brad's name appeared nowhere in the official documentation. But his visa renewal application, which I learned about later through a friend who worked adjacent to the relevant government office, was denied. Processing irregularity. His corporate sponsorship documentation had been flagged for audit. The company that had employed him in Seoul, a mid-sized logistics consultancy, quietly dissolved its Korean operations over the following 2 weeks, which I would later understand was less of a coincidence than it appeared. Brad Hunter, who had chased me to an airport at dawn to remind me that I had nowhere to go that he couldn't follow, was running out of country. I met Kang Dae-hyun again on my own terms. That matters to me. I want to be precise about that. I called the office line. I asked for a meeting. His assistant, a young woman who communicated in the specific register of someone accustomed to managing access to power, said she would relay the request and call back within the hour. She called back in 20 minutes with an address and a time, which told me something about how the request had been received. The address was a private dining room on the 42nd floor of a building in Gangnam whose lobby alone communicated that most people who entered it had been expected. He was already there when I arrived. Standing at the window with his hands behind his back, looking at the city the way he'd looked at the tarmac, like something he was responsible for and occasionally chose to observe. The ring was on his hand. The overcoat was gone. In the sharper light of the room he looked, I don't know how to say this exactly, more human, and no less dangerous. I sat down across from the table without waiting to be invited. You've been watching me, I said. Before the airport. You said he had already been loud before that morning. What does that mean? He turned from the window. Looked at me with that same patient attention. Then he sat down across from me and folded his hands on the table. The gold-class terminal has a comprehensive surveillance system, he said. It is my system. We review footage routinely. You reviewed footage of me. We reviewed footage of him. A pause. He came to that terminal 3 times in the 2 weeks before your flight. Asking staff if they'd seen you. Describing you. Showing your photograph. Something tightened in my chest. He was tracking your patterns, Kang said, simply, as if this were information I was owed and he was delivering it without editorial. He knew your fellowship was ending. He knew you would attempt to leave through Incheon. He was establishing familiarity with the terminal so that when you appeared, he would not be a stranger to the staff. Asterisk. The room was quiet for a moment. And you decided to intervene, asterisk, I said. I decided to be present, asterisk, he said. Asterisk, what happened was his decision. Asterisk. I looked at him across the table. At the composed, unreadable face and the careful words and the hands folded with the patience of someone who had never once needed to be louder than necessary. I need to ask you something, asterisk, I said. Asterisk, and I need you to answer me directly. Asterisk. All right. Asterisk. Why? Not the surveillance. Not the terminal. Why me? Why does a man who owns controlling shares in an airport hospitality conglomerate involve himself personally in a domestic dispute at a check-in counter? Asterisk. Something moved across his face. That almost imperceptible shift, the door opening an inch. Because I have seen what happens when no one does, asterisk, he said quietly. Asterisk, and because I was standing close enough that looking away would have required a decision. Asterisk. It was not the answer I had expected. I had prepared for something transactional. An acknowledgement of calculated interest, a revelation about Brad's corporate connections to his business, something that would let me file it neatly under powerful men and their reasons. I had prepared to be disappointed by it. I was not disappointed. It was something more complicated than that, which was its own kind of problem. I'm not going to pretend I'm not afraid of you, asterisk, I said. I know. Asterisk. I've spent 3 years afraid of a man who told me the fear meant he loved me. I'm not interested in repeating the syllabus. Asterisk. He held my gaze. No, he said. Asterisk, I don't imagine you are. Asterisk. Then I need you to tell me what you want from this. Whatever this is. Asterisk. He was quiet for a moment, genuinely quiet, not performing consideration but actually inside it. Nothing, asterisk, he said finally. Asterisk, I want nothing from you, Naomi Williams. What I want is for you to board your flight without having to look over your shoulder at every gate. What happens after that is yours. Asterisk. I looked at him for a long time. I didn't fully believe him. I'm not sure that was the wrong instinct. But I believed that he believed it, which was a different thing, and it was enough for now. Brad came one last time. Of course he did. Men like Brad always come one last time. It is the nature of the kind of ego that cannot absorb a loss without converting it first into an injustice, without finding a frame in which they are the wronged party who is owed a final scene. He found me in the hotel lobby the morning of my rebooked flight. I don't know how he found the hotel. I had stopped trying to track the architecture of his obsession because that way lay a kind of madness. He looked terrible. The expensive suit had been replaced by something wrinkled. The flush in his face had a different quality now. Not rage exactly, but its aftermath, the haggard look of someone who had been running hard in a direction and hit a wall and was still trying to understand how the wall got there. They took my job, asterisk, he said, without preamble. Asterisk, my visa is gone. My company's operations are done. 3 years of work and everything is just, asterisk, he made a gesture I couldn't interpret. Asterisk, you did this. Asterisk. I didn't do anything, Brad. Asterisk. You went to him. You told him to, asterisk. I didn't tell anyone anything. Asterisk, I held my bag against my side and looked at him with the steady attention of someone who has decided not to shrink. Asterisk, you slapped me in an airport. In front of 50 people. In a terminal that belongs to someone who was already watching you because you'd spent 2 weeks telling his staff to look for me. You did this. Asterisk. His jaw moved. Naomi. I'm leaving now, asterisk, I said. Asterisk, and you're going to let me. Asterisk. Something crossed his face. The old familiar shape of escalation gathering, the physics of a man who has only ever responded to resistance by applying more force. Then he looked past my shoulder. I didn't turn around. I didn't need to. I knew what was there by the way Brad's escalation simply stopped. Like a circuit interrupted. Like something that had been building in him for years hitting an external limit and understanding, finally, completely, that the limit was real. I heard footsteps behind me, unhurried, stopping at a distance that was close enough to matter and far enough to allow me the dignity of having ended this myself. Brad looked at the floor. Then he looked at me. I never meant, he started. Goodbye, Brad, I said. He left through the lobby doors without another word. I watched him go, watched the automatic doors slide open and then close behind him, watched the gray soul morning swallow him. And I waited for the feeling I'd imagined would come with this moment. The relief I'd been promised. The great exhale. What came instead was quieter than that. Smaller and more sustainable. Not the absence of fear but the presence of something else, a still, clear sense of my own outline. The edges of myself, intact. I turned around. Kang was standing 10 feet behind me. Dark suit. Hands behind his back. 2 of his men visible near the lobby entrance, positioned without appearing positioned. He looked at me with that patient, attending expressions. Your car is outside, he said. Your gate opens in 90 minutes. I looked at him, at the composed, dangerous, complicated man who had picked up my passport from a marble floor because he'd been close enough that looking away would have required a decision, and I felt the full weight of everything I didn't know about him and everything I did. You're not going to ask me to stay, I said. No. Or come back. No. Or owe you anything. He was quiet for a moment. What you do with your life, he said, is your architecture. Not mine. I nodded slowly. Adjusted my bag on my shoulder. If I came back, I said, it would be my choice. Yes, he said. It would. I walked through the lobby and out through the doors into the gray soul morning where the car was waiting exactly where he'd said it would be. I got in. I set my bag on the seat beside me and I looked out the window as the hotel fell away behind us and the city opened up into the wide approach roads that led to Incheon. The gold-class terminal was quieter at this hour. The marble floors were polished and empty and the airline agent at the check-in counter smiled with the easy professionalism of someone for whom this was simply Tuesday. I handed over my passport. She opened it. Looked at my face. Began typing. Traveling alone today? Yes, I said. And for the first time in 3 years, that word did not feel like a wound. It felt like a door. I walked through it. Subscribe to see what comes next, and drop your location in the comments. I will love to say hello to you, just to know how far our story has traveled,